Hey Nick, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me, guys.
No worries, man, no worries. I'm just gonna ask you a few questions about who you are and what you do, where you come from, and that sort of thing, if that's all right.
Yeah, no worries.
Awesome. Obviously you run Panorama Mastering over there in
Yep.
Australia, in Melbourne, right?
Yeah, on the other side of the world from you.
On the other side of the
Yeah.
world from me, for sure. um, so, if you don't mind me asking, how did you kind of get to where you are now? Where did you start, and take it from there?
Okay, cool. Started. I loved recording, so I had I got it in the room next door. I've got my mixer that I originally bought, like the 10-track Yamaha mixer. Then I bought like a Z24 because I just wanted to record myself in my band when I was in high school, and I loved it. And I just did that because it was like my pleasure. And then I went and studied music industry. It was like a Bachelor of Arts. It was a bit more businessy, sort of academic orientated at uni. And I'm like, yeah, I really want to get into recording. Did an internship. Turns out it's a different thing when you're doing it for other people than when you're doing it for yourself.
Sure.
So really, I was a shit recording engineer. I knew my stuff, but I just wasn't the right person for the job. So after I was interning there, I ended up interning at Deluxe, and most predominantly I was assisting at Eden Sound Mastering in Baldwin under Martin Pullen. And then I'm like, oh, this is really cool. It was like a workflow I adapted to really quickly because it wasn't you weren't on your feet having to deal with different creatives and mic rooms up and be really you have to be really flexible in a recording engineer's role as you do in a mixing engineer's, but it's a bit different because it's more creative and problem thinking within the material that's already there, not necessarily having to bring that in and be able to be on the ball. Because if somebody in recording, if there's a great take and you miss it or you don't capture it properly, you're really not doing your job to the best standard.
Sure.
Whereas with me, I like the idea 9 to 5, kick back, mix records. I connected with the workflow really well. So I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. And then I'm like, okay, I had enough freelancing work, and I'm like, yeah, I'm opening up a studio. So I put some plans together, built it, moved in, and the rest is history.
Cool. When about was that? Was it a few years ago?
3 years ago now, over 3 years. It was May 3 years ago. So almost 3.5 years now. I've been in this room.
And
Um,
that's
cool.
panorama mastering or panorama mixing and mastering.
That's correct. Took me about a year to plan it and build it. Well, it took me a year to plan it, a year to build it. Then I moved in. So it's like a 5 year sort of gap between the idea and concept to the actual today.
Cool, cool. So yeah, I mean, that's great. And you said that you kind of already had some clients to kind of get going with, or did you kind of like was it more of an uphill struggle getting clients and stuff like that?
I had the clients. The thing is, like, what would happen is the reason why I said I had to build a space is because all my freelance clients would either sit on my bed in my bedroom, or when there were a lot of people, they'd sit on the floor and some on the bed. And I'm like, and it was happening regularly, weekly. And I'm like, you know, I can't necessarily. These clients were at a tier where they didn't have the budget for me to go hiring out space to mix in because then it would just blow the project out of proportion in terms of price, especially where I was at the time. And I couldn't necessarily keep working, you know, part time to full time doing that and having people sitting on the floor on a bed. And I'm like, okay, well, either I drop it completely or I do something about it. I'm like, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to build an environment, a studio, a facility where people can actually sit on the couch, chill, come in. It's actual work environment. You don't have my bed. You don't have fucking a mess and clothes and shit. It's like this is the space for it.
Cool, that's excellent. And it's a really nice space. Obviously, I haven't actually been there, but I've seen plenty of pictures on your social media and stuff like that. It looks great, and obviously we've talked about it loads of times and what you've got. And you deliver attended sessions there at your space?
Yeah, they're the best thing to do. Attended
Yeah,
sessions. You know why? In my thing, I own my workflow. So whether somebody's here or not, it's always going to take around the same time, give or take a bit, because obviously I like having a coffee with my clients and connecting with them on a certain level. But I always, especially when people are in Melbourne, even if they're in Sydney and they've got shows in Melbourne, I actually like push them to come into the sessions because I'm like, um, you're the best asset. You're the best asset to the project being here as it's happening. The
Yeah.
absolute best asset. Because when they sit in the room and they hear a mix coming out of these speakers in this room, it reveals a whole lot, and their face just goes, I didn't hear this. I didn't hear that.
Yeah,
What was
sure.
that? And it's like, okay, well, then we've got something to work with rather than it just being sent off and working in that direction. I work both ways, but I encourage it.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose actually in some ways it speeds things up because otherwise it's kind of email exchanges, right? And not everyone's always opening their email straight away, so that could be a few days and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, it's typically if I know somebody's going to attend, I won't stress too much about developing a solid brief in the email section. Sort of just know what the expectations are. They come in and then we sort of go from there. If it's for remote clients, other parts of Australia or overseas, I'm very, very like, like very, very, I'm looking over everything very carefully, making sure I'm asking the right questions, getting the right information, being very, very finicky about the fine details before the session. So when it does happen and I send it, I know that, there's going to be no kickbacks or revisions. It's going to be smooth sailing, which for 99.9% of the time, it works out like that.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's really interesting. A question I did have actually is in terms of your client base. I mean, you briefly touched on this, but who are they generally? Are they independent artists? Are they labels? And sort of why do you think that they come to you?
Okay. They're a complete mix. So I
Yeah,
have independent artists from people releasing their very first track to people who've been releasing tracks for a decade. Same with labels to small independent labels where it's just like one person sort of running it to larger labels that are distributing all over Australia and even over internationally. And why they come to me, typically the smaller and more personable projects, they come to me because of the personable relationship directly with them, because I'm able to contribute on a personal level to their project, see some development happen in their work, and they really appreciate and value that. So they come to me. For the larger ones, it's usually do with my network and the people I know in those positions.
yeah,
And there's still a value associated with that, but at that level, the amount of options they have, you usually only getting your foot in the door based on who you know, if you're
yeah.
in the right, and that's what enables me to work on projects of all different scales.
Cool. Yeah. So because the reason I ask questions like that is because my vision for these videos are kind of to expose some of the things that maybe aren't often talked about and kind of shining a light on working life in audio, professional audio, whether that's recording, mixing and mastering and stuff like that. And you touched upon like the network aspect of that. And I use the word networking a lot. I'm not I'm okay with the word, but I know a lot of people aren't. For I talk to a lot of people, and some of them just they either don't seem to value that highly enough, in my opinion, or they just don't really know where to begin. Like they might live somewhere and they don't necessarily have any sort of actual friends in music, and they don't know really what the first step is in kind of like building a network. Do you have any sort of advice for them?
Yeah. Find 10 people a day and contact them. Like literally, it can be somebody you watch on YouTube, somebody's site you found when you were searching a term. It could be a plugin developer. It doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah,
Just connect with them. And for the most part, a lot of them won't reply.
yeah,
Okay. But for the ones that do, um, value them like gold and really do your best to learn about them and connect with them and see who they're about. And, if there's any opportunity for you to provide, not necessarily provide something for them of a fiscal value, but to increase their value
Yeah.
and along. Because that's something I do daily. Even now, like I write every morning. I write it on my notepad a list of goals, and one of those goals is to contact 10 thought leaders a day.
Yeah. And thought leaders, how would you define that? Because for me, that's a relatively modern term. You know, in a similar sense that like terms like influencer is and stuff like that. How would you define that, and how would you sort of find who thought leaders are?
Yeah, so thought leaders are people who, in my opinion, are pushing the envelope forward. So they're not people who are 10 years ago talking about the loudness wars, still talking about the loudness wars today. They're people who are in discussion about what's moving forward in this industry and contributing to that. People like what's his name, Daniel Grimmett, and
Yeah.
make the other can't believe I forgot his name, Austin Hull. They're really doing something super special. They're catering to a very new, fresh, evolving market. And I'm in close contact with them because I love the guys, and I'm like, you guys are onto something, and I really want to see if I can help you guys out and provide something for you. And what I am doing is I'm contributing to their community on a
Yes.
very, very proactive scale. To help them and help push forward the great work they're doing. And to me, that's a thought leader because they're thinking about ahead. They're well ahead of the curve in what they're doing. So it can be anyone. They're not necessarily somebody who's a blogger or somebody who is a journalist who's just writing about this stuff. It can be anybody in any shape or form, really doing something magnificent in the industry that hasn't been done before. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. I totally agree with that stuff. I mean, I think you and me are very much on the same page about a lot of it, and I try and be as active in communities as much as I can, and because I think that there's value in it, obviously for the other person, but frankly, there's also value in it for me. Like that's kind of, I mean, the word that I use for this sort of thing is that's how I've built a brand in many ways. The brand of me, not just like unlock your sound or whatever. And I see the same in you. I see the same in Daniel Grimmett, Austin Hull, Matthew Weiss, all of those guys. And I think, honestly, I think especially for people who aren't necessarily like in a city where there's a music vibrancy, my new term for it is like social media and like Facebook groups and stuff like that. It's networking at scale. It's the networking event that's always on.
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of value. I think there's a lot of value there for sure. And I mean, if you can comment on a Facebook thread in a way that provides the other person value, that's an impression, a real impression. Not like a Twitter impression, but an actual impression that you've made on the other person. And I mean, that's how we've connected, for example, and that's how I've connected with many people that I work with, clients and stuff like that. And I think a lot of people are shy about what it means to brand, what it means to market, and I think they might overthink that and see it, put it in a category in their mind that is like big campaigns and stuff like that. But it's actually just putting out value. Like it's actually just, making good impressions on people. And the cool thing is we can do that at scale all day long.
Yeah.
Nowadays with social media and stuff like that. I mean, it's not to be underestimated, really.
I think of it even at a more raw scale than marketing or value creation, because this is the huge issue with the internet. Probably about 5 to 10 years ago was the whole gear sluts wave sort of thing, and that sort of type. That's all that was available, and it perpetuated like a lot of nonsense and a lot of poison in the industry as to perceptions on particular processes, the industry state, the eligibility to even get in the industry and make a living. It poisoned that, and the thing is, some of that a lot of that's been lost. moving on to the Facebook and Instagram section of social media, but it does start to surface from time to time,
Of
and
course.
especially things like that. And the thing is, what I'm trying to do is lead by example in every sense, lead by example. And by doing that, when people see the way I behave, when people see the way I respond, and even other people respond, they take that as an initiative to go feel good about themselves and go, there are people out there doing the right thing, putting themselves out there in the right way. That makes me feel good, so I want to do that as well. And that to me is the core reason why, at least I've been super, super proactive. My actual morning routine is 45 minutes of doing that.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if I do that, it'll be a catalyst for many other people doing it and building that up in a healthy way.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I've seen in, the Panorama Facebook community. I think you do a particularly good job of that, and and you do it in a way that is very much your style, and it's very friendly and very educational, but at the same time, it's not just you putting out stuff and you telling it how it is. It's you creating conversation, you know. So for sure, yeah.
If you look on groups, in the left it says about, and then the next one is called discussion.
The
So
next one, sorry, what?
So if you actually look on the left side of tabs on your groups on your desktop, it says about and discussion. And discussion are where all the posts go in. So it's not necessarily just a thread list, it's actually a discussion list. And I
Yes,
like to make it in that way because that's why people join groups, for discussion. They don't join it to have a class filled of ads or to be pandered with information. They join it to be discussive. So
indeed.
I think super important that aspect of it's always nurtured and it just doesn't become a
Guess
big,
that's
yeah, yeah, yes, exactly.
excellent. Well, thanks for sharing all of the above. Now, I think be a good it's be a good time to start talking about some of the more nitty gritty side of the stuff that we do in terms of mixing and mastering and stuff like that, because I'm sure people will be expecting to get some of that out of this as well. Um, what I'd like to ask you actually is what kind of presently relevant piece of advice that isn't necessarily prevailing sentiment, but in a practical context, would you give people today, like in terms of audio, in terms of mixing and mastering, in terms of their mindset when they're, working on something?
It's really, really hard to answer because there's so many different contexts and so many things I could say to advise somebody in a practical way.
Yeah,
The only thing that actually something that has remained always, but I think is lost more now than ever, is time. Because here's the like everybody wants instant gratification. People 15, 20 years ago, you knew when you were starting out that you had to work really hard, you had to grind a bit, you had to build up your chops. Now people just see all these plugins with all the marketing and all this sort of information, all these e-courses, make your mix sound massive, do this, do that. And they feel like if they consume 10 e-books and 3 e-courses and all these different YouTube videos that they're going to be the next Pensado when they mix
yeah,
their record. Only been in the game for half a year. My thing is appreciate time. So the time it takes you to build up that skill set, it will not take you a year. It will take you a lifetime to build up to your full potential. So don't expect it on the first day. Take your time and be respectful of that process. Don't get
yeah,
frustrated. Understand that, okay, you know, just look to pursue better each time you do it, but don't look to perfect it at any one stage because it takes a long, long time to be very, very happy with your mixes. Like it's taken me a long, long time, and even now, still, I'm always finding things in my mixes I wish I'd done or wish I'd changed. But only like as of the last year, I've been really, really content with the mixes I've been pushing out because I've been going, oh wow, these sound absolutely balls amazing, and then a couple of weeks later, I'll go, I wish I did this, and
yeah.
that's what.
And and a big part of that, in my opinion, is, naturally, as your skill improves, also your standards improve along with it, and your ear improves along with it, and that's just part of the growth process. There's no finish line in this.
No, not at
There's
all.
no, oh, that's it, I've mastered it. I
Yeah,
mean, not mastered. I mean, mastered in the general sense of the word. I've mastered mixing, and now I'm done. It's not. It doesn't, tail off
stop.
like that. It's just continuous growth. I mean, I know that from, you know, I see that in even the big guys who, for the most part, still remain really, really humble, always open to hear other people's opinion, and they're open to be wrong about something, you know.
Yeah,
But it kind of goes back to what you're saying about, look, this is going to take a long time. It should take a long time, and no amount of courses and YouTube tutorials and endless Facebook threads is gonna.
fix
I
that.
don't think it really speeds anything up. Like, I don't. It might speed things up that are unnecessarily slow without a a formal education of some sort. I mean, I'm blessed enough to have a formal education in audio, and if I didn't, then for me to be where I am now, it probably would have been longer and slower than necessary. But at the same time, I didn't leave university as a mastering engineer. It took time to develop my chops, and I'm constantly developing them. So because I talk to people, Nick, and they're like, Chris, man, my mixes they're not great. I'm like, how long have you been doing this for? And I'm like, 6 months. And I try and be as kind of constructive and as helpful as possible, but I do have to reset their expectation constantly. I go, look, you haven't been doing this very long. Even if you're doing this 24/7 over 6 months, you've just begun. It's just because you've done this course and you've watched all these tutorials and you know all the stuff. Even if you know everything, you're still at
Yeah,
you're still at the beginning.
yeah. I was
Because
actually continue.
I was just going to say, because you could know everything, but then you get this mix, and this mix has this problem,
Yeah,
and to solve those problems, only experience tells you how to do that.
yeah, yeah.
That's all I needed to say for that.
I wanted to push something just a little bit because you were talking about you don't necessarily think that e-courses or that sort of content pushes you along any faster necessarily. You don't. But here's my thing, and this is something I take out because I've spoken to Matthew Weiss on a few occasions, and I've actually consumed a lot of his content, and I've actually consumed a lot of it recently. And the thing I've enjoyed about it isn't necessarily the techniques, because there's something that I've already got in my vocabulary when I'm working on my projects, already understand and already have full concept of. But the thing that I engaged most with and actually learnt, and I believe sped myself up a lot, wasn't in fact the individual techniques or tech talk. It was actually the thought process of another engineer. And that comes like we do peer reviews each week, and
Yeah,
understanding your process and developing those sensibilities, because thought process is the essential element of our job, because we are
yeah,
audio engineers. What do audio engineers do? We solve audio problems. We negate a set of values and create a solution. So thought process, I think, is the most important factor people should be taking out of those in order to enable them to speed up their progress, because that's what we do. We are problem solvers at the very base of it, and we get a set of values, and we have to be able to process them.
yeah. I agree entirely. I mean, I think that's actually what's missing from a lot of this content. Is do this, do this, do this, do this,
Mm.
but why? What's the goal here? Like, I get a lot of mastering questions, and fundamentally, because mastering is still, you know, mystical for a lot of people. And it's not a mystical thing, but what I find as time goes on is that people they know how to master, but they don't actually know what they're trying to achieve. They don't know what the goal is, you know. And when you don't know what the goal is, you can't possibly know what action to take, right? So it's always that's where people start throwing plugins and stuff like that and running it through Ozone or whatever presets, because they don't know why they're doing it. And I think a lot of that is kind of missing, you know, like in content. It's like, why are we doing this? What is the goal? You know, what is the mindset of a mix engineer, of a pro mastering engineer, or what have you?
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Yeah, I haven't got anything to add to that because it just concurs with what I said. But yeah, on the same plane there, mate.
Awesome. So, in terms of mastering, I mean, let's define mastering. I talk about mastering a lot, you know, and you're a mastering engineer, I'm a mastering engineer. You know, obviously this is going to go in my group and I imagine your group and stuff like that. But define mastering. What are you? What's the goal? What are you trying to do? And what's the purpose of it?
Okay. Purpose purely is to create the production master.
Indeed.
Okay, so the production, the actual final thing that gets duplicated and sent out. That's what you're creating. I think before you look at what is mastering, you have to look at the values of what a production master has. So what are the values and what do they present? They're translatable across different devices. They present the music and the style in their best light. They're formatted correctly for the platforms in which they're, or the media in which they're disseminated on. Once you understand those values, then you can create a production master. And I think that all ties into what is mastering very, very solid, because all the processes to get there are relatively the same. Sometimes they change up. So you've got your surgical aspect of things when you're correcting things in the actual processing chain. You've got creative decisions to make, dynamic decisions to make in the actual processing chain of all that. But predecessor to all of that is actually communication and negating the mix prior to any of that, and communicating with the client, the mix, whoever's put that together, and understanding the values of the project. Because what will happen is, if you get a label sending you something and it's set in stone as it is, you have to negate the mix as it is. If you're working directly with the mixing engineer or the client who has issues in their mix, you can actually have a little bit of constructive feedback and actually develop that in order for you to get a better end result in mastering.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely agree. And in terms of that, like, so in terms of, you know, for people like mastering at home, or even mixing at home, I mean, you touched upon this, but what is a kind of like mindset hack that you would pass on to people? You know, just a frame of mind that you advise is best to adopt when mixing or mastering, and you can choose in which context in which to answer that question that you find most relevant.
Okay. My thing would be for mastering, and this really throws out all the technical shit that we tend to talk about, is print yourself off a production master, okay? Print it off, or do as you please if you're doing it at home. Take it and consume it like your listeners would, okay? So put it in the CD of the car, put on your hi-fi system. Do not listen critically like you're an engineer, but listen.
Passively, yeah. Listen passively.
Leisurely.
Yeah.
Leisurely would be the word. So sit there in the car, drive to work, listening to it, enjoying it, have it in the background of the office, enjoy it in that sense, and then say, is this the way that I imagine other people connecting with it? Because that's the essential. That's the essential what we're doing, and I think that will provide a lot of value. Because what will happen is, maybe there might be in the car a sub, and the sub just blows out of proportion, and instead of you daydreaming while you're driving, you've just been like, what the hell was that? And then you found something that distracts the listener and disengages them from the music. Or it could be a really sibilant or super sibilant vocal that's come out on the hi-fi, like a kitchen radio or something that's just piercing out, and you're enjoying having your meal with your friends or whatever for lunch, and then this vocals popped out and absolutely pierced everybody's ears. I think appreciating the way people listen to your music is super important on that final one, and that's probably the strongest tool you have in the home studio, because you don't necessarily have access to magnifying glass monitoring systems like we do here in mastering studios.
Indeed. Yeah, I mean that's actually really, really good advice. I didn't see it coming actually. And it's really, really good. It's really simple to deploy and it just makes sense, you know, because that's what you're trying to make. You're trying to make the master that works, you know, that isn't distracting. It just kind of, you know, plays out and you can enjoy it leisurely because, you know, if you don't master it well, you can't enjoy it leisurely. And that's kind of it's not supposed to be distracting. You should be able to just put music on and just have it on and not have these problems, you know, creep up and distract you from just leisurely listening.
Yeah, you shouldn't hear the mastering. Basically, you should just hear the music.
Yeah, so it should be a transparent, for the most part, a transparent process.
It can be a very intrusive process, but you don't feel it happening. Like you don't feel a master bus compression slamming against anything and pumping the whole track. It might actually be slamming, but you don't hear that happening. You just hear the music as it should be presented in its best light.
Yeah, I mean, when I say sort of transparent, because I've had this conversation before quite recently. When I say transparent, it should be like it sounds great. I mean, that's my goal with clients is I want them to go, God, it sounds really good, and I don't know why. You know,
Okay.
That's kind of what I want. You know, I mean, obviously, trained ears will be able to go, oh yeah, you did that, and you kind of optimize the dynamics a bit, and it's a bit fuller in its EQ or what have you. But you know, for me, that's kind of the goal. It's like, and it's not just louder than their mix or mixes, because you know I say, look, turn it down or whatever, and you know, please AB it, please, you know, consume it. Don't just assume that I'm right. You know, please, you know, it's your sign off.
Yeah,
you know, because it's your master or what have you. So yeah, I totally agree with you, man. 100%. So for anyone watching, so before we wrap up, so for anyone watching, and they're looking to get into working audio, and I've already kind of asked you this, but you've said obviously that you know, we've discussed that networking is important because that's how it all happens. You know, everything you want has to come from someone else at the end of the day. And you know, things like translation that we talked about. In terms of it doesn't have to be practical or anything. Do you have any sort of last pieces of advice that you'd give to someone? Like someone might be they have been into music production for some time and they produce their own stuff and then started to think, oh, actually, I wouldn't mind being a mix engineer or recording engineer or a mastering engineer. So aside from any of the stuff that we talked about, is there anything else?
Actually, yeah, no, I do have something which I want to voice here because I voiced it at the Melbourne Audio Trade Show when I was on the panel. And basically, there was a question asked: when did you first realize that you'd become a professional or been working as a professional? And a lot of them said, "Oh, when I dropped all my part-time incomes, when it was only that income, this, that, the other." And I said exactly opposite. I said the first time I got paid $50 for a mix, I considered myself a professional. And they're like, well, why? And I go, well, because that $50 is super freaking valuable. And if they're putting money on the table or any exchange on the table, I treat myself and I position myself like a professional and treat that $50 like a professional would treat a $1,000 project. And I think that mindset people have to take, because what happens is when they're making this transition from hobbyist to professional, they sort of in this limbo stage where they give themselves less credit than they deserve.
Yes, I actually completely agree with that, and I'm really glad that you brought that up.
They're like, oh, you know, I'm only charging him $100 a mix, and you know, I've got all this other stuff going on, and they're wondering why they can't break through that barrier. But if they respect that $100, like they're an absolute top tier professional, they will get the respect, the recognition, and work, and their work ethic and their workflow for themselves and the one they present forward to people will actually be something of a caliber. People will talk about and go, hey, this guy is real, this girl, or whoever it is really good at doing their job. I paid him $100 for a mix and they treat me like gold.
Yeah, that's professional.
That's professional. And it doesn't matter that you might not be making your full income from that, but you're never going to make a full income from that if you can't treat it like it is going to ever be one.
Yeah, exactly. You have to kind of, consider yourself. I mean, in my opinion, because what I see a lot of actually is people comparing themselves to other engineers a bit too much. And, for me, I'm like, well, the first person that I need to convince that I'm a professional is myself in order to convey my professionalism to my clients. And frankly, no other party matters.
Yeah.
I'm providing them a service. If I feel that I've professionally delivered a service and they feel they got a professional service out of me, not just a product, but an actual service, that is what makes someone a professional, because I had this conversation recently somewhere online and someone was like, oh, what plugins or whatever do I need to get in order to consider myself a professional? So it's nothing to do with that. It's the service that you deliver to the other person, and that's where professionalism is.
But it even pushes you further in another sense. It just doesn't. It's not just a service, because then when you start treating yourself and respecting yourself as a professional, you'll look at yourself in a different light. You'll go, well, I'm a professional who's provided this service. What would a professional do in order to better that? What would a professional do in order to present that, in order to attain more work like that? What would somebody with that value actually do in order to push yourself forward? And I think as soon as you make that mindset change, I remember, I'm going to go back to that $50 example. That $50 example, I probably spent 20 hours of work on. So I was on Chinese sweatshop labor. Like, it was absolutely like the lowest being paid, but I treat that $50 like it was gold. And that's the philosophy I've taken all the way through. So I think if you're a hobbyist, you want to get into the audio game, treat yourself like a professional, even if it's not fiscal payment and it is a payment of another sort, if they're exchanging a service for a website design or whatnot. Treat it as top tier professional as you can. And the other thing to learn is, which I think is a big eye opener, and this will, if you skip to the very start of this video when I was talking about when I was starting out, is it's a big mindset change, because even for myself, loving recording as a hobbyist, jumping in and doing it for other people is a different game. So that's something you really have to be considerate about. Is it something that you're passionate about because you enjoy it on a personal level, or it's something that you can actually connect with and adapt into a professional landscape? Because you will struggle if you can't adapt to other people's needs and wants as much as you
Yeah,
can.
exactly. I think that's a big part of it actually, like, because that's an important thing. When you're just doing it for yourself, you can do what you want. But the moment, the day that you decide to make money from it, or make a living from it, is the very moment it stops becoming about you. And actually, I know quite a few. I know some professionals who actually don't quite get that yet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, look, it's not about you. Look, if you want to, if you want to do this for money, it means you want to do this for other people.
Yeah.
And frankly, at the end of the day, your one's ego is not what's going to pay the bills at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's happy customers, it's happy service.
Yeah. I was actually having the discussion with Martin. I was at Eden Sound Mastering yesterday because I went to catch up with him at lunch and having a chat with him, and because we both mastered the same mix, and my one was really, really freaking loud. And He's like, why, there's no need anymore, with Spotify and the whole thing. And I'm like, the client wanted it. As much as I can do my
100%.
to educate them, especially with electronic labels, don't even bother trying to educate them, because part of that landscape is when they send mixes off to artists touring Ibiza and play and to get played in big sets like big trance sets and whatnot, they want it as freaking balls to the wall loud as possible. And the thing is, yeah, as much as it sometimes kills me to push it that far, it's part of the gig. It's either somebody else or me doing it, and I feel like I do a really good job of it in terms of making something smashingly loud and not absolutely crunchingly crap.
So now that you've said the L word, Nick, you've said it, man. You opened the loudness door.
And I didn't want to do this.
Huh?
I said I didn't want to do this from the start.
Yeah, but it's inevitable. I mean, I totally agree with you on that, and I'm going to make this quick. But sometimes the pendulum swings too far the other way, and now it's almost like loudness is kind of demonized, and anything above minus 16 LUFS is too loud, and this completely defeats the point. Like, the problem with the loudness war wasn't loudness. It was the pursuit of loudness at the expense of the material.
Okay.
And this is kind of why I posted in the Unlock Your Sound group recently, and you had a bit of fun with this. The LUFS wars are now in full effect. And you coined that before I did. You said something like the normalizing wars.
Normalization wars, yeah.
Normalization wars. I mean, and do you know what's really, really worrying me is, and this is kind of what separates the men from the boys and the women from the girls, is that this is frightening, okay, in my opinion, but I'm seeing people going, oh yeah, I supply my clients with a single master for every single platform.
I hate that. I get the logic, and if it's working for somebody, good on them. But in my opinion, why not make one fucking kick-ass master that sounds good, that can be as loud as its potential fulfills, and goes everywhere? Because at the end of the day, LUFS it's a weighted measure of loudness.
Yeah, frequency weighted.
So if two tracks are at 14 LUFS, guess what? They're both there. So if it gets normalized down or moved around so they're both at the same, they're going to be both the same loudness, no matter how squashed or no matter how dynamic it is. They're both going to be negative 14. So in my opinion, make the absolutely best sounding cracking one you can do, and no matter where it goes will sound good. And not to mention, how many times has that standard been changed in the last 12?
Exactly.
3-4 times. You can't re-upload it every time it gets changed. And just as I've said that, this has only happened in 12 months. Does that null and void every other great sounding master that's happened in the last 20 years? Because I guarantee I love AC/DC records, and they are sometimes really loud, and I listen to them. They are on Spotify, and they sound good, but they weren't mastered to negative 14 LUFS. Why is that? Because they didn't give a shit. They just made it sound good.
Because a good master is optimal on its own merit, and it's timeless. And it will translate anywhere. And the worst thing that's going to happen to it is someone's going to turn it up or down.
Yep.
That's the worst case. It's not. Just because you've got a peak to loudness range, if you like, of 13 or whatever available to you on Spotify or YouTube or whatever doesn't mean that's the right dynamics for the material. You know,
Yeah,
louder isn't better, but neither is more dynamic.
yeah. Well,
You know,
did you hear Kenny Joy's mix he put up? The one that he's put on the ARIA mastering. He's had a few other mastering engineers do it.
no,
Um, Self was really, he uses a lot of mix bus compression to the point it was quite loud as it was, and it sounded good.
yeah,
That's all. And,
and
and,
I'm
and it
not
was
sorry.
and it was just the mix as it was, and it was loud. And if people saw that number, they would attest to it. But if they heard it, they would not. They would hear it's quite loud as it is, but they wouldn't polarize it or say, "Oh no, that's no good."
Yeah, and if I was to master that, I'm not going to turn it down. Oh, it has to be minus 16 LUFS. So what am I going to do? Turn it down? No, I'm just going to make sure it's fine, you know, and do my bit as much or as little as that is, and that's how it is. But anyway, I thought you said the L word and you opened the door, so I kind of walked through, if that
Yeah,
works. Yeah.
try not to. Yeah, for me, I just don't like. I don't enjoy the discussions because here's my thing. It's important a light is shined on it to an extent. Very important to an extent that people are aware of it. But for it to take the forefront of discussion when we discuss music and the way people listen to it and the way people consume it, I personally believe that it is something that nulls itself. Because basically, the whole idea of normalization is that, like, hey, all the songs play at the same level. So why do we discuss the level in which we
Yeah,
output it? We played
I
at the
know.
same level. And then, so why don't we discuss more important things, like negating, like a good discussion which hasn't been and hasn't really been developed or really been fleshed out, is the fact that we consume a lot of media on our smart devices, on shitty little iPod headphones, on your iPhone, on your iPad tablet, on your laptop. What about discussing mastering and mixing techniques in order to translate things really well to those devices, or discuss people on the way YouTube degrades audio quality is absolutely horrible. So
Yeah.
what are some key factors that in a final master actually sound pleasant on there, and what things actually get altered in a negative way, and that we should be very aware of? Those are discussions which I wish came to the front of the foreground, because that actually has direct correlation to the things that we hear at the end of the process.
Yeah, I mean things like peak and distortion and stuff like that, that's important, because if you don't pay attention to such things, you're going to get really unexpected and quite disappointing results when you do start to play after they're converted and you start to play them through iPhone speakers and whatnot. Um, all of a sudden, when you if it's clipping in the iPhone speaker, all of a sudden the loudness is no longer a problem. It's that distortion or whatever it is, to mitigate any problems in translation.
But those are discussions on the way we consume it, which I think is, or the way people will consume the music if you don't negate those things early, which I think is more important, because the landscape of how we consume our music is changing
Oh,
ever
completely.
like stupidly rapidly. And also, it's just, to me, it's just crazy. You consume music on up to 10 devices in a household, not just your hi-fi system or cars anymore. It's just crazy.
Everything. Yeah, indeed. Indeed.
That battery plays music now.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing all of the above, Nick, and I'm sure this is going to be of value to people watching. And what I'll do is, like I said, I'll post it into the group and stuff like that, and I'll tag you in it. So if anyone has any questions, or they can ask in the comments on YouTube or what have you. So, but is there any last bits that you would like to share before we sign off?
Nah, nah. Otherwise, we'll be here for the rest of the day. And so I'll love and leave everything. But
Excellent.
if
Well, sorry.
they do have any questions, it's healthy to ask.
Yeah.
So
Cool. Cool. Well, and also, where can people find out more about you and see what's coming next from you and that sort of thing?
um, so you're going to tag me in this, so just
Yeah.
click on my um, add me, have a chat. If you Google my name, Nicholas Roberto Di Lorenzo, if you Google the studio, Panorama Mixing and Mastering, you'll find it. Um,
Cool.
if you're in Australia and you just even search Mixing and Mastering Studio, I'm the first result up there without paid ads. So it's just right there and you can get to it
Awesome.
quick.
And I'll put a link to the Panorama group as well.
Yeah, cool, cool. The Pan FM is cool. Um,
Panafan.
it's the cousin of the Unlock Your Sound group.
Nice.
But we like to think of ourselves as slightly cooler. Um,
Yeah, you probably are, to be honest. I'm okay with that. It's
that's
because you're cooler than I am, so I'm all right with that.
all right. As long as you come to terms with it, that's good.
Cool, man. Well, thanks again for coming on, and I'll see you next time.
No worries. Take care.
Cheers, Nick. Take care.